Following the Boston Massacre, a bloody assault by British soldiers on Americans, Benedict Arnold responded, "Good God, are the Americans all asleep and tamely giving up their glorious liberties?" As a result, Benedict Arnold took action and seized New Haven gunpowder supply following the Lexington and Concord skirmishes. Arnold wanted to make a larger mark, so he asked Dr. Joseph Warren and the Massachusetts Company of Safety to authorize an expedition to capture Fort Ticonderoga of New York with their 80 cannons. Arnold had a tendency to criticize and ridicule those he disagreed with, so this created an uneasy alliance with both Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys on this expedition. This proved further difficulties when James Easton questioned Arnold's authority. The death of his first wife, Margaret, in the spring of 1775, greatly harmed the war effort. He responded, "An idle life under my current circumstances would be but a lingering death." He took this event and turned it around for the better, and made his life mean something for the war efforts. Later in the war, he met Peggy Shippen, whose father was a strong loyalist. This marriage brought social status, but not the wealth he craved since he was a child. After British withdrawal from Philadelphia in spring 1778, Arnold became a military commander of the city under George Washington. Unfortunately, later, he was charged with illegal selling of goods in May 1779. Fortunately for him, he was acquitted with mild reprimand from Washington, who liked Arnold's war strategies. Peggy Arnold met with Major John Andre during the British occupation, whom she had contact with through British soldiers across the battle lines. General Arnold and General Andre often used Peggy as an intermediary, providing the British with troop locations as well as locations of supply depots. Due to Washington's favor of Arnold, he assumed command of West Point, but unfortunately for the Continental Army, he began systematically weakening its fort's defenses, refusing to order needed supplies, and did not make necessary repairs. Arnold and Andre met in person on September 21st, 1780, which was a very risky encounter. Days later, Andre was captured with evidence describing Arnold's role in the West Point surrender plot. Arnold learned of this and fled to British lines, while Andre was hung on October 2nd. This act ironically gave the Continental Army more morale than they had actually had, boosting their war effort. Under English command, Arnold attempted to gain control of the British East India Company and the military, but he was not successful. After the war, he settled in New Brunswick, Canada. As the traitor of the United States, he is still disassociated with Revolutionary War monuments. The Sons of Liberty motto, "No taxation without representation," pushed their movement to further degrees than ever before. The Sons of Liberty included many groups who used terroristic tactics to raise awareness against the British Crown and undermine their authority. These groups were mainly led by Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Joseph Warren, and Paul Revere. In Boston, these stamp acts were enforced by Andrew Oliver in Boston. After assaults on their homes, both he and Thomas Hutchinson resigned. This represents the Sons of Liberty's use in mob rule, fear, force, and violence. They also stockpiled arms, shot, and gunpowder. Their main event was the Boston Tea Party in December 16, 1773. This event involved 342 chests belonging to the British East India Company to be thrown off by the Sons of Liberty dressed as Mohawk Indians. This event included 60 men dumping tea into the Griffin's Wharf. In response, the British Parliament passed the Intolerable Acts in the colonies, which shut down the city's tea trade as payment for destroyed tea. This act, although responded to by the British, became a catalyst for the start of the Revolutionary War and the shot heard around the world in Lexington and Concord just soon after. This event both united the colonies and drove war efforts.
George Washington was commissioned to take command of the Continental Army in June 1775. Washington was commissioned to lead the American army against the British due to his military background and because of his advantage in experience with warfare with regards to other available candidates. Although George Washington was recruited to lead the army, he was ill-suited for the job at first. Washington's knowledge for fighting lay primarily in frontier warfare, involving relatively small numbers of soldiers. Washington also had no prior experience in maneuvering large formations of soldiers, handling cavalry or artillery, or maintaining supply lines adequate to support thousands of men in the field. Even though many disadvantages were present, Washington was able to improve as leader of the Continental Army because of his courage, determination, and mental agility to keep the American cause one step ahead of defeat. During the early stages of the war, Washington's task to defeat the British was not so overwhelming. At this stage, the British had a foothold in Boston. The British soon realized that Boston was no longer tenable. When June arrived, Washington was faced with defending against a new part of the British Army led by Sir William Howe. His orders were to take the city of New York. Howe commanded the largest expeditionary force Britain had ever sent overseas. Washington's task to defend New York resulted in failure against Howe's army. The British had a large advantage in their naval strength compared to the United States' military. After the defeat, 2,800 men at Fort Washington were forced to surrender. Washington ordered his army to retreat across New Jersey. They crossed the Delaware into Pennsylvania on December 7th. At this point in the war, the British had good reason to believe that the American cause for independence would soon end. Instead of pursuing Washington's army, however, Howe went into winter quarters. On Christmas night, the same year, Washington's troops crossed the Delaware and attacked the Hessian garrison in Trenton, forcing them to surrender. This plan of action was one of the most daring military operations in American history. Soon after, Washington and his troops crossed the Delaware again, outmaneuvered the British forces sent to capture them, and finally, he inflicted a humiliating loss on the British. Washington's primary goal throughout much of the rest of the war was to keep the British contained in New York. The thought to take New York back was renewed with a French alliance with the Americans in 1780. Washington's forces combined with the French allies Rochambeau totaled around 9,000 men. After assessing the situation a second time, a decision was made to attack the British army under Cornwallis at the Battle of Yorktown. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis's army surrendered to Washington's forces. 2 years passed before a peace treaty was completed. The victory at Yorktown effectively brought the Revolutionary War to an end. Washington resigned his commission on December 23, 1783 at Annapolis, Maryland. After Washington's accomplishments, he was labeled an American hero and later served as the first president of the United States of America. After the end of the Revolutionary War in late 1782, British negotiators in Paris signed to peace terms in late November. In 1783, Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States in the Treaty of Paris. The Continental Congress named a 5-member commission to negotiate the treaty with Great Britain. John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, Thomas Jefferson, and Henry Lawrence were included in the 5-member committee. The conflict of the Revolutionary War eventually led to the compromise of the agreement over the signing of the Treaty of Paris. This ultimately recognized American independence. This conflict and compromise shows very clearly how leaders of countries must listen to the ideas and comments of people within their country in order to form a more perfect union.